show you how I make my mackerel feathers, or more importantly mackerel lures, because mine are technically not feathers, and they're made from something that everyone probably has in their household. You just need a few odds and ends to go with it, some line, a few clips, a pair of scissors, and you're away. So what I'm going to do now is I'll just run through the components you need to make these lures, and I'll do a step by step how I make mine. Okay, I've laid out the components that you're going to need to make these lures. I call them lures because they're not feathers, and you'll see why in a minute. But basically, they're imitating those daylights, which I showed you earlier. So first thing is some 60 pound line. Now it's a bulk spool of 60 pound line, come from Germany. Not a lot of money, but it's very strong. Secondly, this is an old spool I've had for a few years now, and that's 35 pound. It's almost like what we'd use amnesia, so it's like a memory free, fairly thick, nice and stiff, perfect for the snood lines. Now the thing I had a little bit of trouble finding a decent amount of were the hooks. There was plenty of hooks that were too fine a gauge, not strong enough, and they blunt very quickly, or they bend very quickly when you're shaking them off, which is something I'll come to later on when we go fishing for them. So I trawled around and eventually I found a supplier of these hooks. Now they're size 1/0s. Let's have a look. Size 1/0s. And you can see they're a straight point. They're a medium gauge wire, and they've got a fairly decent eye on them, which is important because I'm going to use a knotless knot to attach this to the snood, incorporating the lure. I've also got a couple of little bits that you'll have in your tackle box anyway, which is the standard lead clip. It's quite hard to see that, but it's literally a little lead clip and a 120 pound swivel, which you'd use to attach rigs to your leader. So what I'll do now is I'll go through the process. I haven't mentioned the main thing. So this is the other thing you're going to need, one of these. And believe it or not, this is going to form the lure. It's a little bit big at the moment, so you have to do a little bit of work to it, but I'll go into it now. Take your milk carton, a pair of scissors, and basically through the scissors. It's very easy to cut. Don't have to use blades and knives or anything. You can literally cut it into strips like that. That bit's no good. You've got the base there again. Just literally get your scissors, run around, and you're making little sheets of plastic basically. You'll end up with that. That's your piece of plastic, and it's still a little bit big. So yeah, keep all your plastic together like that, and the next stage is you're going to get your scissors and cut them down. And what you're aiming to do is you're aiming to cut small strips off like that. They are 50 millimeters long and around 7 to 8 millimeters wide. It's not critical. If you have them too wide, it then tends to add to the resistance going through the air. So I'd say between 5 and 8 millimeters maximum, but 7 millimeters is probably perfect. So what you ought to do then is sit down with your scissors and your bits of plastic, chomp away until you end up with a complete pot full of plastic. So you end up with 4 of those, and I say 4 because I tend to make my lures in sets of 4. If I'm on the beach and the mackerel are further out than I can reach with a cast, I wouldn't be tempted to chop 2 off and put the lead on and just have 2, because I'd rather catch 2 every cast than not being able to reach them. And that does work, so I've done that before when they've been just out of casting range with 4 because of the drag. Cut it down to 2, and the same setup will go that little bit further and pick you up the mackerel. So next stage. Okay, so as I said, I do mine in sets of 4. So I've got the 4 hooks here. I've got the 4 pieces of 7mm plastic, and I've also got the snood line, 40 pound snood line. What I'll do is just, this is only a rough estimate, around about 8 inches, 10 inches of line, just cut it off, do 4 of those as well. So this will literally form one set. So there's 3. And this is 4. I always do them a little bit longer because you're going to need a little bit of slack later on and to do the knotless knot. So 4 pieces of the 40-pound line, 8 inches long. This is a little tricky bit, the only fiddly bit there is really to this. If you can do the knotless knot, you should be able to do this very easily. What you do is you get your piece of plastic and you've got it like that. And this is the part that's going to hug the eye and the shank of the hook. So what I do is I get it flat like that. I've got a pair of flat pliers. These are crimping pliers, but they've got a flat end in the front. Put that piece of plastic in there and just gently pinch it. And what you're aiming to do there is just make that into a little collar shape like that. And that is where the eye of the hook is going to go. So do all 4, as I say, once you've done it a few times, you can do it very easily. And then just a quick grip of that, the plastic stays where it should be, like that. And do all 4. That's around about 1 centimetre, the fold at the end. So if you've got that there like that, the fold is around about 1 centimetre. Nothing is set in stone here, it's all a little bit flexible. That just gives you something to work with, because I'm going to do about 7 or 8 turns of the knotless knot. So that's the final one done, as you can see. That's what it looks like from that angle. So, take your hook, 1/0, point down. What I then do, take one of my pieces of snood line, feed it through the eye, lay it along the back of the shank of the hook. Fingers crossed you can see this okay. The next thing you do is bring your plastic up like that and you lay that on the back of the shank of the hook as well. So you've got that like that. Then knotless knot, so round the top, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 1, 2, back. From the back of the hook, exactly the same as you would do carp fishing. Put the snood line through the eye of the hook. I use my pliers again now to just tension that down. The knotless knot will now tighten up and grip that plastic to the back of the hook, like that. And that effectively is your first lure done. It's not finished, but that's what you're trying to achieve. The knotless knot and the plastic bonded to the shank of the hook. What I tend to do then is just with my scissors trim off the excess piece of line. It doesn't have to be snug, and I leave the tail of the lure that long for now, at the original length. I've done nothing to that at the moment. Later on you can modify that, and I know some people who like to put a little dab of super glue on the knotless knot there. I never have bothered. It tightens up and grips itself anyway. So tighter you pull that, the tighter it grips. That's the first one complete. I'll quickly do the other 3 now. Okay, that's all 4 done, all tied on, ready to be added to the rig body. So I'll put them to one side, move on to the next stage. Now we get the rig body, which again I mentioned earlier, 60-pound line, very strong. Probably a bit overkill for this, but I'd rather be safe than sorry. So what I do is pull off an arm's length for that. I said I'm going to be making 4 up. I roughly put them on the line 10 inches apart, so you want 40 inches plus a little bit above it, a little bit extra there just in case. First thing I'll put on is the lead clip at the bottom. I sometimes hook this on the wall and in the shed as a jig to keep it straight, but I use a simple knot for this. It's 3 times round, through the loop, 3 times back, this is what I was saying earlier about the shop bought rigs. They're okay. A little bit of saliva on there, and then hold that clip and bed that knot down tight like that. You can see that knot's bedded down well. It's not going to slip, and when I trim that off, I leave 5 or 6 mil. There's no need to trim it down tight with this sort of thing. So that's the lead clip on the bottom. And what I now do, it's not, I don't measure it or nothing, I just do it by what I think, and it's a simple matter of putting 2 overhand loops into that main line. And that also is worth mentioning, every time you put a knot in this line it does weaken it, so using the 60, even if I put some knots in it, it's still going to be well above the 30 pound, which I'll be casting a 3-ounce lead with it. So, bit of saliva on there and tease it down slowly. I'm looking to get that around about 8 inches from the lead and bring it down. And as that forms, you'll see that knot will suddenly go into a figure of 8 like that. And that's what you want. That's how you're going to mount your lure into that figure of 8. And there is a method to doing this, and there's a right way and a wrong way. I hopefully will show you the right way. So, get one of your pre-prepared snoods. I'm going to put a little angle on the end of that line there, a little 45-degree angle to make it easy to go through. Now, this end here is the lead end. So you want the snood pointing away from the lead, if that makes sense. So when you've got your 2 little loops there like that, you open that top loop like that, take your snood line, put it through that loop, fold that back, and there's the loop at the other end of the figure of 8. Put that through there like that. So that line now is trapped in that figure of 8. It's just a question then of just gently tightening the figure of 8. Don't do it too much yet because that snood's way too long. The idea is when you're finished, the snood points up towards the top of the rod, so it automatically stands off. If you've got it round the wrong way, the snood will then hang down. It's got more chances of tangling. So that's why it has to be pointing up the line like that towards the top of the rod. So what I'll do now is, to get that snood length right, is pull that line through until the lure almost comes up to the knot. I leave around about 1 centimetre between the lure and the knot, and then with this other end of the lure snood line I form a loop and then go 1, 2, 3, 4. Gain a little bit of saliva on there, pull the knot down. So it's basically a version of a grinner. And as you then get hold of the lure, mind the hook with your fingers, obviously you can use pullers and things like that. As you pull that down, you'll see that the grinner knot will then bed in with the figure of 8. Pull both sides. I also then give the end of the snood line another tug using a pair of pliers or pullers, and then that snug that knot down. That leaves you with the lure on about, I don't know, 5 centimetres of line, but kicked off, sticking out, pointing away from the main line, and that's what you're looking for. Get the cutters, just trim that down again, not too close, about 5 or 6 mil left. Doesn't have to be trimmed up tight. That's what it should look like when it's finished, and that's the first one on the line. So I'll just repeat that process again. No measurements involved. I roughly mark out 8 inches like that. Tie my loop, double overhand loop, and then form that figure of 8 there again. Round about 8 or 10 inches above. They can't touch because the snoods are only 5 centimetres long. So then bring that down again, and then there's your second figure of 8. You just repeat the same process for all 4 lures till you get to the top, and that's what I'll do now. Okay, that's all 4 of them done now. As you can see, they're all facing the right way. They're all facing up towards your rod. So for the purpose of this, I'll add a swivel to the end. I tend not to use anything on this end. I'll just tie a figure of 8 loop and I'll attach that to a clip on the end of my mackerel rod. And I'll go through in a minute the sort of gear you're going to need. It's nothing spectacular. You can improvise. Oh yeah, quickly tie it. I've just done that a little bit too short. Let me just make that a little bit longer. Leave yourself a little bit of room to work with. It makes it easier to tie the knot. So there you go. A bit of lubrication and spit. Probably should use something else, but there you go. Tighten that down. Another knot pulled down tight, cinched right down, and then cut off with 5 or 6 mil again. No need to put any of these right down. That's your swivel on the end. That attaches to your rod. Your lead attaches to the other end, and that's your string of 4. Overall length is around about 45 inches. So, and what I normally do then is I give them a nice roll round, little self-sealer bag, and they are ready to go. I don't know if you can notice on those ones in there, what I've done is just put a little V-notch in the end of the tail. It was something I was experimenting with last summer. I used those, and the other way of doing it, I'll show you quickly on one of these. And the daylights, that is imitating the daylights, what you actually buy in the shop. There was also this one which I'd done, which I thought it was more like a whitebait imitation, so cutting it to a very fine point like that. So I cut the lure to a point like that. You can experiment with all different things, or you can just use it as it is like that. I tend to just dress them up a little bit. That's my favourite way of doing it, with a little V-notch. Don't know if it imitates a little fish's tail or something. I don't really think they're going to have time to inspect that, but yeah, do a nice little tying session. I normally tie out 20 of them, and that's it. Put all the gear away. The hooks I bought 1,000 of them online for next to nothing. Funny thing about these hooks is I've had some of these on a winder, which I'll show you in a sec, for 3 or 4 years, and they're still as sharp and no rust the day I made them. And also these haven't disintegrated either. The plastic is obviously not going to fail with time as it would with feathers. If you use something like that, probably half an hour, 3/4 an hour chucking them and having mackerel hit them, there'd be nothing left of the feathers. They'll be stripped off and you'd just be left with a little bit of tinsel. But there you go. So yeah, that's how I like to set mine up. I make up little batches of them, keep them in the box out of the way. I don't go mackerel fishing a lot, but as I say, if I want a little bit of bait or a little bit of sport sometimes, just go down there for an evening when the mackerel are in. I normally take a bass rod with me as well, have a little go for the bass. If there's no bass, get a few mackerel. Can't beat a mackerel on the barbecue first thing in the morning when you come back from fishing. Just before I go on to the tackle, this is something I've been doing for a while now. It saves so much time and bags and things like that. It's ready to go. So basically, a little bit of pipe lagging. It's about 8 inches long. What it does, it's got a nail in that end, or a pin, whatever you want to use, just to pin the swivel on. That one's got a swivel on because I use it on here. Wrap it round your pipe lagging, and then all you do is take it when you get there, undo the hooks, spin it round. Simple as that. Once all your hooks are off, as you can see, I think they're about 3 or 4 seasons old. That it's still as good as the day it was made. When you get to the end of the pipe lagging, there's your lead, already on a clip. 3-ounce lead, that is. I tend not to use much more than 3, maybe 4 at the most. 3 normally does me for everything. And that's ready to go. Just straight onto the rod and you're away. At the end of the session, pop it back in the end of your thing, and your lagging, bring that round on there like that, and as your hooks come up, put them in the lagging. They're not going to get snagged up and tangled up. A lot of people just throw them in the box at the end of the session. They get home, there's a big ball of hooks and line and everything, and you'll be forever sorting them out. So This is a little bit of a time saver. And I know I'm a bit OCD, but when I get home I'll also just get that whole thing there and rinse it in a bucket of cold water, just to make sure any excess salt comes off of them. Leave it out in the sun to dry for a bit, and there you go. That goes in the bucket. I've got 2 or 3 of them in the bucket ready to go. No need to mess about with poly bags and things like that on the beach either. So the next time you see me, I'll be using these on a mackerel rod on the shingle. Fingers crossed.